Is a class-based speciation something to be concerned about?
Elaborate on that a little bit. What do you mean exactly?
Well, by class-based speciation, meaning there's already a tremendous amount of wealth that is accumulated within such a small percentage of people. And whether it be through a bifurcation, a split of a couple billion people off of the human species, or it could be a trifurcation, we don't know how many splits there may be, whether that...
I don't know if it's something to worry about or something to hope for. I mean, this timescales are so large that it's probably not relevant to individuals.
Potentially something to hope for in the evolutionary trajectory of the human
species. Well, you kind of hope that people get smarter, might get smarter across time. I guess we would hope that might be a good thing. I mean, it's not self-evident.
So if it is a lottery, if it was a roll of the dice to be born where we are, don't we also feel that it could have been a roll of the dice to be born in a place less fortunate, therefore...
Sure, we do feel that. I think that's why that, even successful people often feel guilty because of inequality. It's no wonder.
Your ultimate calling in terms of with the religion and with finding self-actualization and meaning within you is to, like you say, eradicate suffering is something that gives so much meaning to life. Well, sometimes people in less fortunate circumstances experience lots of suffering with lack of food or water or shelter or basic physiological needs. And so then, therefore, doesn't it feel like within this potential class-based speciation with wealth that there should be some sort of assistance?
Of course it does.
Okay, and now the conversation is how we do that.
Well, so there's a couple of things there. I mean, to the degree, I've been a vocal opponent of the radical left, and I can't detest them enough, really, my fundamental position. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that a functioning polity requires a left and a right wing. Absolutely. And the reason it requires a left wing is because inequality is real and it has to be addressed. It has to be addressed for all the reasons that you described. But that, having said that, there are ways to go about addressing it that are clearly counterproductive. And those were tried to great destructive power in the 20th century, and I don't really think we need to do that again. A corollary to that is we don't know what the productive means are. Now, I've been thinking a lot about that, and I'm thinking, well, how do you solve the problem of inequality? And it has to be something like the moral burden on those who are successful has to be increased. It's something like that. And I think you see that. I mean,
I think I wrote this to you, that what's the significance of purchasing a third yacht rather than maybe hiring 50 people to solve a problem in the world?
Well, it's hard. These things aren't so simple. Like, let's say that you decide to go out to a restaurant and your meal is $500, and you might think, well, that's reprehensible. And, well, perhaps you don't think that's reprehensible. But the thing is, it's not a bad way of dispersing extra money. So it's not that obvious what rich people should do with their money that's beneficial. And you think, well, should you buy a third yacht because do you really need it? And, well, that's perhaps a particularly egregious example, but it's not like you're not employing people when you do that. You shouldn't stuff the money in your mattress. We could say that, right? Because that's just pure hoarding. But most people who have money aren't like Scrooge McDuck. They don't have a money bin that they swim in, right? Their money. Well, that's the kind of clueless picture of wealth. I mean, most people who have money, their money is out there doing things. It's not like it's in their bedroom. It's in gold coin form. So they're not hoarding it in exactly the same way that perhaps people used to hoard wealth when it wasn't as abstracted and functional in its own terms out there in the economy.
Their money is usually working for them, making them more money.
Yeah, but it's also doing a bunch of other things, and if you're a bad money manager, even if you're wealthy, your money tends to disappear very rapidly. That's another thing that's really worth knowing, is that there is a 1%, and that 1% does have a disproportionate amount of the money, and 1% of that 1% has an even more disproportionate amount of the money. It scales all the way up the measurement spectrum, let's say, but there's actually quite a bit of mobility within that 1%. So you have a 10% chance in your lifetime in the United States of being in the top 1% for at least a year. Now, that's not like 100% chance, but it's 1 in 10. It's not dismal, So partly what you hope for is that there's some genuine upward mobility. But then I think the other thing that you hope for is that people who are disproportionately successful take it upon themselves to do everything they possibly can, to do whatever they can that's the best possible thing to do with their money. And, I'm kind of an admirer of Bill Gates for a variety of reasons, but he's doing a really good job of putting the boots to the world's 5 worst transmissible diseases, and that's going quite nicely. They're making some real, polio's just about defunct.
Yep.
They're making some real progress with malaria. Like, there's almost nothing that could possibly be done for Africa that would be more useful than to get rid of malaria. Sleeping sickness would be another one that would be really useful to eradicate. And so I would say that the long-term solution, assuming that there is one, to the problem of inequality is that people who are disproportionately fortunate, let's say, or successful, or both, take the moral duty of doing the best possible good that they can with the money that they generate.
Correct.
But the other thing I think that's sort of interesting about that is I actually don't think there's anything more interesting to do with your money than
Correct.
that. It's like, can you think of anything more interesting to do with your money than to find a really difficult problem that causes a bunch of people suffering and then try to fix it? It's like,
It's amazing.
if you have a clue, that's got to be a little better than a third yacht.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's pretty low. Well, it's kind of a low, like that conspicuous consumption thing at some point. It's just, if you have any sense, at some point, that's just not